If I go there, Toby will wait for me in the cab. Laboratory. He will pick up the scent of this mysterious substance. Search, Toby. Search. Congratulations, Toby. Now let us see what you have found. This is the bottle that was used in the laboratory. It was buried here. There is still some liquid remaining in the bottle, with gold flakes, a tiny caterpillar. Not surprising to see one in a garden, but at the bottom of a bottle. Let us determine just what we have found here. Let us pour liquid from the bottle into a test tube to perform an analysis. This is the bottle that we found hidden at Kew Gardens. A colorless, water-based liquid. Quite a strong floral aroma.
Holmes? What are you doing?
It has a bitter taste.
What if it's poisonous?
Did you ever see poison stored in enormous jars like that? Anyway, there is a doctor nearby.
So what do you think it is?
It is some kind of organic compound. Let us vaporize the liquid and see what happens. Small colorless crystals. Colorless, tiny crystals that are soluble in water, with a floral smell and a bitter taste. Watson, could you pass me that small bottle, please?
Of course. Here you are. Holmes, do you know what it is?
Wagner's reagent. There was a label on the bottle that you passed to me.
No, Holmes, I meant the bottle that we found.
Let me add the reagent and see if there is any sediment, and then I shall tell you. Red sediment, just as I suspected. This liquid is of organic origin. It contains some alkaloid. Most likely it is unstable, and that is why there is a quantity of gold dust to prevent contamination. This mixture is probably a fertilizer. Someone was carrying out unusual experiments in the garden's laboratory. According to the deadly plants information, in order to perform our experiment, we will need fertilizer and food. Caterpillars should do nicely. This substance is an alkaloid, the same as in the bottle we found in the bushes at Kew Gardens. Perfect, Watson. We can begin our experiment.
This green... What should we do?
Oh dear, Toby. I wasn't aware that you were Watson's new literary agent. I imagine that one of these plants would be capable of releasing a toxic vapor. I need to find out exactly how it could be done. I shall begin now. Watson, if you are at all optimistic to have dinner this evening, then I'd recommend that you put on the gas mask. It appears to open after being soaked with alkaloid. Toxic gas with spores. Extraordinary. The plants would be capable of killing only if they were directly next to the victim and stimulated at precisely the right moment.
Let us take our caterpillars to the Colonial Collection Room. We may see things more clearly there.
It is too early, Watson. Our suspects will be there. Let us investigate Kew Gardens one more time and ask some questions. This is one of the outlets of the ventilation system. These plants come from all the territories of the British Empire. Can you tell me what Mr. Dunn was doing upon the day of his death?
I can, but there is nothing very special to say. I was in the laboratory when I saw Mr. Dunn heading towards me. Tuesday is the day of his weekly visit. It was supposed to be at 9, but he was 10 minutes late, as usual.
And then?
Well, he came in to say good morning. Then I saw him spend 2 or 3 minutes by the plants outside the laboratory. After that, he ran out in the direction of the nursery, where Mr. Hamish was working. He was always in a rush during the inspection, you see. I would pity anyone who stood in his way.
And that was the last time you saw him?
Yes. I stayed in the laboratory until 20 minutes to 11, when I heard the cries of Albert and Mr. Hamish from the large glass house.
I joined them as soon as I could, for I knew that something must be very wrong.
What exactly were you doing in the laboratory?
I was recording an experiment for my thesis. I only stopped my work once when Mr. Hamish visited me briefly around 10 o'clock.
You say you were recording an experiment when the tragedy occurred. Might I listen to the roll?
Certainly. Please do. You will find it in the laboratory. It is number 320.
Thank you, miss. Your father's death does seem highly suspicious. What were your movements here on that day?
Suspicious? Well, I was working in the seed house, taking care of Lysa something, or Lear Pontus, or... No, wait. These Latin names. And I spent so many hours trying to memorize them.
Did you see your father that day?
Yes. He came here with Mr. Hamish for his weekly visit. There was nothing unusual about that.
And then?
Nothing. They stepped out to the backyard. It was perhaps 20 minutes before 10 o'clock. Then about 10 minutes later, I saw my father heading for the dry tropics room while Mr. Hamish returned here.
And Mr. Hamish and Miss White, what were they both doing that morning?
Mr. Hamish visited me a couple of times. I also saw him returning from talking with Miss White, and that was at 10 minutes past 10. But then he ran back here to me to tell me that my father was feeling unwell. We hurried across to the water lily room, and I found my father lying dead on the floor. Oh, my God.
Thank you, young man. We shall see you again soon. Can you tell me if you saw Mr. Montague Dunn on the day of his death?
Yes, of course. I met him, and we went to see Albert, his son, at around 9:30. He appeared quite calm.
What were you doing on the morning of the accident?
After paying multiple visits to Albert, I had a little talk with Miss White. Then I returned to my desk to complete some paperwork. Suddenly I observed that Mr. Dunn was not feeling well, so I ran immediately to fetch Albert. I clearly remember that it was around 10:30, for I was late that morning.
Thank you, Mr. Hamish. We shall continue our investigation.
Everyone has gone, Holmes. The way is clear.
When Montague Dunn was standing close by the plants, the caterpillars were released. and caused the deadly spores to activate. Panicking, and likely already half asphyxiated, Montague Dunn started back and knocked over the bust. He rushed to the door, but it was locked. He had to force it open with his shoulder. We already know the outcome. Montague Dunn collapsed and died not far from the pool. Well, it is time to perform our experiment on the ventilation system. The caterpillars could only fall from the ventilation duct. Our caterpillars are in place. I'll activate the ventilation system so that they fall down. Watson, stay here and observe.
All right, Holmes.
Before start, the power is on. The engine has started. The ventilation system is working. From here, we are unable to see the interior of the Colonial Collection Room. Excellent. This ventilation fan is working. Let us see if I can activate the other one. We can see the interior of the Colonial Collection Room from this window. Perfect. Now I just need to find Watson to check the result.
It works perfectly, Holmes. Bravo. Now, if you could just help me to get rid of these caterpillars.
Perfect. Now we know how the murder of Montague Dunn was carried out, by activating both Albert's and Mr. Hamish's fans.
But only from Mr. Hamish's workplace would it be possible to see when Montague Dunn entered the Colonial Collection Room. Let's go to Scotland Yard.
Inspector, I believe that Martin Hamish is guilty of the murder of Montague Dunn.
Aha! I knew it. I'll send the lads around to arrest him.
Very good. I shall wait to hear from you. Inspector, I came here as quickly as I could.
Martin Hamish is in the large glass house. There's no need to hurry.
Holmes, my God!
Yes, we found him like that.
Our messing around with the ventilation system didn't go unnoticed. Mr. Hamish realized that we knew.
Inspector, could you arrange the body, please? I should like to examine it.
Holmes, his left shoe is unique. This anomaly is often a characteristic of...
A club foot. Bravo, Watson. That is the key element of this case. The mark around the neck is very visible. He died instantly. Something about this rings very oddly.
Why do you say that, Mr. Holmes?
Why? Because of Mr. Hamish's club foot. Oh, I deserve to be kicked from here to Charing Cross. I should have noticed it.
But, Mr. Holmes, I can't see why.
No, I don't suppose you do. You must recall that Mr. Dunn was locked inside the Colonial Collection Room by the murderer. If it was Mr. Hamish, he would have had to run up to his workplace to trigger the fan situated above it, taking into consideration the condition of his foot.
Well, it is still possible.
Perhaps, but it is rather strange that such a person as Mr. Hamish decided to base his plan on the speed of his gait.
You mean to say that somebody helped him?
So the suicide is questionable?
Correct. Mr. Hamish accuses only himself in his letter, and so the investigation stops.
Possibly an accomplice, then? That idea had not occurred to me, Mr. Holmes.
I have another idea, Inspector. Thanks to the testimony that we have collected, we are able to rebuild the events as they took place that day.
With a timeline, such as we did in the Jack the Ripper case.
Precisely.
The map at the entrance of Kew Gardens should help us with our timeline.
Let us analyze the facts and statements so that we may recreate the events of that morning. Let us summarize. Montague Dunn was poisoned inside the Colonial Collection Room. He forced open the door, which means that someone locked him inside there at 10:20. Martin Hamish was last seen at 10:10. This means that he has approximately 10 minutes to lock the door of the Colonial Collection Room. Given that he was club-footed, it is doubtful. Albert also has 10 minutes to lock the door of the Colonial Collection Room, which is quite enough time. Miss White was last seen at 10 o'clock, which means that she had approximately 20 minutes to lock the door. More than enough time. Perfect, Watson. Now, let us ascertain who assisted Martin Hamish in killing Montague Dunn.
But Holmes, how can you be certain that we'll find Miss White here?
It is obvious, Watson. Just use your brain.
I am using it. I do use it.
Now that the rope has tightened around Martin Hamish, Miss White must act to erase all traces of her implication. After the suicide of her accomplice, there is one final trace remaining, the deadly plants of the Divine Syndicate. She will be there.
Very good. Shall we go?
Just one moment. Now listen to me, Watson. I shall see her alone. You will conceal yourself behind her, quietly.
Whatever are you planning?
Nothing spectacular. The impulses of women have always been a mystery to me. But she is a bold one, and so we must be cautious.
All right. You can count on me, Holmes.
Mr. Holmes, good day to you.
You do not seem surprised, Miss White.
Well, I was expecting you.
Not for too long, I believe. So please tell me, as it is still unclear, who planned the murder? Was it you?
You were wrong, Mr. Holmes.
It was Martin Hamish, then. You managed to convince him to take on a more prominent role.
You could not be further from the truth.
You think that you can fool me?
You don't care what I think.
I am not blaming you, Miss White. You are a young and brilliant woman, trapped in a dull and hostile world. Life has never been easy.